Hi, I'm Kathleen Scott, a current master's candidate, career development specialist at Pepperdine University, and filmmaker. Today I want to explore a few different topics that will contribute to helping you understand students and the education profession. I graduated high school at age 14 and started college soon after, so I am very much a non-traditional student. One of my favorite things about education is learning with people from all walks of life whose unique individual experiences really help foster an excellent collaborative environment. Being an educator means that you'll be taking on a role where you are working with students who have external circumstances that make them who they are and will absolutely be reflected in the classroom. It is then up to you to work with them to bring out the best in your students. For this presentation, I'd like to take the next 25 minutes or so to explore three topics: learning styles, managing diverse backgrounds, and technology in the modern classroom. By the end of this, I hope these topics will give you a better understanding of what the new classroom will look like when you enter this field, and provide some food for thought in thinking about how to serve students best. Significant progress has been made towards promoting inclusion and embracing technology, so I believe we're in for a great conversation here. The concept of learning styles has been around for so long without really being questioned until recently, which makes the discussion surrounding the idea that they're a myth rather intriguing. I was introduced to learning styles many years ago when I had to take a VARK test to see which learning style one identifies with: visual, auditory, reading and writing, and kinesthetic. Visual prefers the use of pictures, graphs, and imagery to learn. An example would be flashcards, while auditory prefers to listen, discuss, memorize, and debate when learning. An example would be a lecture and discussion-based classroom format. Reading and writing has the preference for the written word. An example would be classroom handouts and slide presentations. Kinesthetic prefers a hands-on, participatory type of learning that takes a physically active role in doing so. Examples would be lab experiments. Have you heard of these styles? Learning styles were brought up again recently in one of my classes in school, and we found that while students may have preferences in how they learn, no evidence really suggests that catering to those preferences will lead to a better understanding. I, for example, am a kinesthetic learner, which means I would thrive when learning occurs by carrying out a physical activity, rather than listening to a lecture or watching demonstrations. Though I appreciate hands-on learning, I don't believe that one method is universally effective in learning multiple subjects, nor do I think I would enjoy learning everything one way. For example, history subjects may be better comprehended by reading about historical events, whereas art or film subjects may be understood visually. Among academics who reject conforming to learning styles believe that learning styles are not necessary to incorporate useful knowledge about learning into one's teaching. Whether we call it talent, ability, or intelligence, people simply vary in their capacity to learn different content areas. This is where you and your input comes in to form your own opinions on the subject. Learning styles exist as a reflection of a student's upbringing or background. It is up to an educator to find a method of teaching and learning that works for each other mutually. For instance, I've tutored various age levels from K through 12 more recently to college age at my universities. And I've never focused much on learning their particular preferred method, so I would agree that working learning styles into teaching is not always necessary, because my students still yield good results. I would say that is especially true for young learners, as I believe it's essential to instill a flexible mindset early on, as not everything in life will cater to one's specific strengths or preferences. Of course, that is a personal preference, as I still highly tailor my methods to the student's overall personality. High school to college age learners tend to have had the idea of learning styles heavily ingrained already, which makes it a bit more resistant to trying new methods because they believe they're somehow at a disadvantage in trying a new approach. To communicate with students, teachers have to appeal to all learning types. So as you develop a teaching style, you may find it helpful to try and create lessons that incorporate all four learning styles. Not only will be catering to each learner's strengths, but you'll also get your point across in many different ways, which is extremely helpful in absorbing information. I wanted to make the session a bit more engaging, and I believe that's important to hear from different sides. So I have some guests here to give their input on this topic. I wanted to hear from some educational game changers. As students' ages progress, so does the communication when engaged in expressing their individual learning styles. First, we have a kindergartner who will share what his favorite learning method is, which is?
Read.
Next, we have a second grader.
Spoken.
We also have a 10th grader share a bit about his experiences with learning styles.
If I just hear someone explaining something, sometimes it doesn't stick well in my memory. But if I see an image of what they're talking about, then I can associate that with the lesson. And I think hands-on is the best because you can really tell if someone is understanding a lesson or not.
Lastly, I have Jose, who is a teacher and will be sharing his thoughts about how he incorporates learning styles into his classroom.
So it really depends on the subject that you are teaching. That is when some learning strategies may not apply. One of the ways that they are able to do is, some of the things that they're able to do is put them into small groups, kinesthetic with kinesthetic, visual with visual, and have them do activities that will help them further their knowledge on the subject being taught. And even at that, a teacher is able to mix them up so that way peers learn from one another. And maybe the kinesthetic learner will be able to see, oh, I like how my friend who is a visual learner is learning this way. And he will be able, or she will be able to really grasp information a whole different way.
So now that you've heard a few different viewpoints, I'd like you to consider your own thoughts on these topics with these food for thought questions as we transition into the next topic. Do you believe that utilizing learning styles is useful for students? Why or why not? Can you think of a time where they may not apply? I'll give you a few moments to write down some notes or type them on a device, but I definitely encourage you to toss out some ideas as we will come back to these questions later on. Now I'd like to move into a discussion about inclusion. Multiple publications have been published discussing the educational field serving and managing students from different backgrounds and needs. The most commonly recurring topics are accommodating disabled students, accessing school-provided meals, having access to technology, and all of these topics, but from a view of the impacts that the pandemic has had on these things and trauma-associated related events. One report states that 13% of public school students have a disability that requires school-provided accommodations, and rates are almost double in financially stressed districts. 80% of students who have mental and/or behavioral health needs heavily depend on such accommodations. 35% of households with children under 18 years old are now food insecure. 4.4 million households with students still lack consistent access to a computer, and 3.7 million lack internet access. There's another study of more than 1,500 families which shows that 40% of children received no support in special education programs that require accommodations. 20% received full support, and 1/3 did little or no remote learning. Children in low-income homes are 3 times more likely to not have consistent access to a device, and 5 times more likely to go to a school not offering distance learning materials or activities at all. Unfortunately, these students are simply not getting the support that they need. Schools that had enough financial resources to embrace technology fared much better than those in lower income districts. The pandemic has without a doubt revealed and accentuated many issues that have long existed in schools. Fortunately, some efforts have been made to provide more healthcare access to children to protect their well-being in these times. Children in poverty are particularly vulnerable because of underlying psychosocial stressors. For those considering a career path in teaching or administration in low-income districts, this is information to keep in mind when serving students and promoting an inclusive education, as geography without a doubt changes the needs of students within a particular district, and you'll need to adapt accordingly. Inclusive education means different and diverse students learning side by side in the same classroom. It values diversity in the unique contributions that each student brings to the classroom, and in a truly inclusive setting, every child feels safe and has a sense of belonging. Students and their parents participate in setting learning goals and taking part in decisions that affect them, and school staff have the training, support, flexibility, and resources to nurture, encourage, and respond to all their students' needs. Schools provide the context for a child's first relationship with the world outside of their families, enabling the development of social interactions and relationships. So it's important that that first exposure is a positive one for these children. So what are the basic elements of an inclusive education? Let's take a look. Use of highly trained and qualified teachers as well as teaching assistants or specialists to provide additional support to the students and teachers. This is in addition to the school and district providing ongoing professional development opportunities for all staff. A teacher has the responsibility of seeing to it that the students learn their lessons well. This responsibility covers a wide scope of tasks, and sometimes the teachers can find that doing so many tasks can be a bit too much. Teaching assistants and specialists play a key role in supporting the teacher to ensure that the students get the maximum benefit from the learning activities that the teacher plans and carries out for them. As students learn best in a safe, nurturing, and positive environment, a teacher needs help inside and outside the classroom to create and maintain this kind of setting. In stressed districts with limited resources, teachers can take on more responsibility than one can handle. In pursuing this career, consider and assess what kind of support a school you would be interested in teaching at would provide in these situations. Having an extra hand or even being that person can make all the difference to ensure that students and teachers are equally supported. Next, inclusive curriculum includes relevant themes and contributions made by marginalized and minority groups so students see representation early on. It also allows for adapting the curriculum to the learning styles of children with special education needs or accommodations. As I mentioned before, providing and utilizing necessary ongoing professional development is essential as we think about how to develop learning plans that keep up with the times and include the history of all students, so that these different backgrounds are accurately represented and taught. Diversity is an important factor in teaching, learning, and family engagement. Schools have become more diverse in recent years, yet the incorporation of culturally and linguistically responsive curriculums have lagged behind. Cultural and linguistically responsive curriculums essentially aim to understand diverse students, discuss and recognize social issues, and use multicultural resources and materials. It also values the engagement and contributions of children from diverse cultural and linguistic backgrounds, such as English as second language learners. Lastly, parental involvement. In a diverse school system, inclusion means thinking about multiple ways to reach out to parents aside from traditional practices. Parents are a wonderful yet underutilized resource available to teachers to better understand their students. Educators should actively work to break down barriers that may keep students' families from fully participating in their children's education, which could be work schedules or language barriers. Schools and educators should be working to learn about the families and community in which they teach. So how can we advance inclusive education? Ensure educators have the training, flexibility, and resources to teach students with diverse needs and learning styles. Provide freedom. Allocate funding to make resources and activities inclusive and accessible to all students. This includes bigger things like making technology available to students who don't have access to it, or things like ensuring materials have closed captioning or are otherwise made accessible to students with disabilities. Enable the community to work together and participate in the design, delivery, and monitoring of education, making education a shared responsibility as it takes a village. Provide mentorship early on to students who are underrepresented in certain fields, such as women in STEM. Some 40% of all 15-year-old students in the U.S. are expected to have either a health or STEM career, and of those, male students were 4 times as likely to be expected to have a STEM career than female students. Lastly, hold governments accountable. Implement those anti-discrimination laws and legal mandates for inclusion and policies to remove barriers and ensure that students are supported enough to show up to class ready to learn with minimal external stressors. This is best and most relevant for those considering an administrative or legal educational sector career, such as myself. There are many different roles within the education sector, so be open to explore different paths, as you never know what might pique your interest. Teachers have experienced increased stress and responsibility to adapt and create new plans since the pandemic to shift to online learning and react to current events regarding social justice. Offering and seeking guidance and techniques is useful as there's something to learn from yesterday's educators on your quest to become an educator of tomorrow. Educators agree that building relationships is one of the most important things that you can do. Build a dynamic where students feel safe and represented by creating a bias-free, inclusive learning environment. Parents are one of the best insights one can have in learning how to work with their students and be aware of what's going on outside of the classroom in their students' lives. Lastly, teacher mentorship focuses on connecting with other teachers who are seasoned for one's own mentorship and advice in pursuing this path. This conference is an example of that. You are not alone in this journey. Of course, I am not an expert on this topic, and I acknowledge that. I am every bit of a lifelong learner, and I encourage you to be as well. Rather than taking on the whole world's problems, it's important to focus on your own corner of the world, as you can still make a significant difference in doing so. I've been fortunate enough to have the opportunity to discuss these topics of diversity and inclusion in school, and be able to pass on this information to you so that we can get these conversations going. With that being said, I do have a few more questions to reflect on as we shift into our final topic. Is your school doing a good job catering to diverse backgrounds? What are some things you would like to see at your own school be implemented to manage an inclusive education? As an educator, what are some things you could do to promote an inclusive education? Again, I hope you will take some notes on these questions for when we come back to these points. Now, transition into our final topic of technology. When getting creative about utilizing digital tools for learning, teachers see the emergence of online social media and the support gained from using such media as a versatile tool. Since the COVID-19 pandemic led to mandatory school closures across the nation, the education sector had to adapt quickly and embrace digital forms as tools to facilitate distance learning. As a result, the changes have sparked some exciting innovations, but have also resulted in some challenges and revealed problems within school systems regarding accessibility and disparities. Many virtual schools are seeing a lot more interest and growth, which indicates a competency gap. Schools that typically operate via exclusively in-person instruction have had many more articles and anecdotes written by teachers stating that they were shaken and flustered in having to adapt to online teaching and being given up to 60 child class sizes. Remote education had long been criticized for causing a distraction by focusing on learning how to use the technology rather than focusing on learning the subject at hand and solving educational problems that would improve understanding and achieve learners' goals. However, many scholars state that those judgments are unfounded and have no real truth to them, as mobile learning has proven to be just as effective. In fact, your generation is more equipped than ever to react and adapt because of evolving technology. However, learning and teaching via distance learning are still somewhat independent and require a unique and separate skill set. So, what methods can the next generation of educators contribute to the classroom? Let's see. Transmedia. Technology provides an opportunity to appeal to different preferences. Transmedia storytelling is the technique of telling a single story or story experience across multiple platforms and formats using current digital technologies. It is a great way to engage students as, for example, if you wanted to have students start a fictional organization as a project, they could build a website, start a social media campaign, and then film and edit a video describing the organization. They would be using several different platforms to tell their stories here, making it transmedia, which is great as this is seen all around us and teaches students how to maximize the tools that technology offers in order to reach the widest audience and make the biggest impact. Next would be, rather than popping out a usual quiz, game apps on students' devices add a new level of interactivity. Think Kahoot! Game apps in general can be really fun so long as they're introduced in moderation. Some schools use apps such as Duolingo, but some are taking it a step farther in using virtual reality. Virtual and augmented reality are some of the most exciting and cutting-edge trends that are shifting in the way we blend technology and education both in and out of the classroom. Virtual reality moves toward the concept of a global classroom by allowing for immersive experiences that allow students to explore the world without actually leaving the classroom. Augmented reality is the lesser talked about yet equally exciting counterpart. It is an enhancement of reality or a digital overlay of your surroundings. Pokemon Go would be probably the most well-known and somewhat early mainstream example of this. An educational version is an app called Mondly, which uses augmented reality to teach languages. Finally, encourage students to build a learning community. My best experiences have been with teachers that excite students to connect outside of class and keep educational discussions going. This is accomplished through collaboration, self-paced study, discussions, reflections, and providing a space outside of class for additional conversation, such as group chats or finding safe spaces to explore students' interests. By this I mean an example could be Scratch, which is a programming website developed by MIT to introduce children to coding. On Scratch, kids can code, program, and develop their own original video games and interact with other kids to learn and collaborate. Teachers that encourage the use of tools like this that provide interaction are promoting a strong learning community. Once again, I'd like to bring my guests back to see how technology has worked for them this past year. First, we'll start with the kindergartner, as I know doing kindergarten online and using technology has been really exciting for him, and maybe he can tell us why.
Because then I could do it on my own.
So he likes the independence aspect of technology. Let's move on.
Ooh, they give us tablets and download this special app called iReady, and that's what allows us to do it. It's so easy for me that I can understand it, and that's what's successful for me.
Teachers have introduced Edpuzzles, Castle Learning, YouTube videos, Google Slides, and Google Docs for us to learn. I have an IEP, so taking notes and really following along in class is not the best for me. So online learning right now is helping me a lot because I could just go back to videos if I need to and watch certain parts and always look at a lesson multiple times if I need to.
Some of the things that I know some teachers and myself were doing, I talk from personal experience when I say that what I was doing was a lot of movement. I was not sitting down with the students. I wasn't simply lecturing them, but in fact, I was having them move around, dance around, hand motions, different things, depending on what I was doing, I had different movements for every single thing. And it really caused teachers to think outside of the box. We were so used to teaching in person, being with one another, building relationships in person with the students, that now we had to think outside of the box. Everything that I was doing online was extremely successful, and they have brought it back into the classroom, and I see that they have grasped on many different things, and it was the beginning of the year at the end of the year. But it is extremely nice to see that everything I was doing really did pay off.
Thank you so much to our guests and their fantastic insight and really sharing with us. I'll turn the conversation back to you and leave you with this final batch of reflection questions. What creative ways have teachers introduced technology into the classroom? What made it successful? What ideas do you have to incorporate technology into the classroom? So I hope you've been taking notes as we near the end of our session, and we'll be revisiting these questions shortly. As an older member of Gen Z, I am very excited to see what the future holds for this new generation of educators. My generation and younger are changing the way the world works regarding what matters and sparking meaningful change across learning institutions. Learning styles, inclusion, and technology are topics I am highly passionate about. At this conclusion, I hope you will begin reflecting on how you can use this information to craft your own unique teaching style, build a safe and interactive space for students, and see what you can do to make a difference in your field. My passions are in law, education, and public service. My goal is to use my experiences to restore faith in education as a source of personal investment and growth, and I am working toward it every day. I hope you'll join me. Thank you, and a special thank you to Educators Rising and our wonderful guests. I would